of the reasons that I asked for this public hearing is that we were getting a lot of calls in my office of concern. And whether we can take action that stops or starts a program, it's important for us that you have an opportunity to address CDFA and OEHA and let them know what your concerns are. So that's really the purpose of this meeting today, and hopefully they take your concerns to heart and put programs in place that actually meet the needs of the citizens of Sonoma County. So this really is your opportunity to state what your issues are.
All right, thank you. With that, how many people wish to speak to this item today? Okay. There are lights up there on the wall. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. The green light means you have 3 minutes. It will turn yellow, and that means you have 30 seconds left. And when it turns red, your time is up. And would appreciate it if you would conclude your sentence and give the next speaker a chance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I might just offer a suggestion that I know people who have concerns are certainly able to speak to those. It's the interchange of questions and answers. And we might ask Lisa to kind of keep track of what the questions are as we go along so that the professionals here can respond to them at the end.
That's a good point. Yeah, if you have questions, please direct your comments to this board. And if you have questions, we'll take note of them and try to get your answers at the conclusion of public comment. So as we don't enter into a dialogue or debate here. That's not the purpose for this particular hearing. All right.
I was
yes.
to also mention too, today we have with us Dr. Maddox Gonzalez from the Sonoma County Health Services Department, who's been kept informed and knowledgeable about the topic, as well as some USDA, Maria Baroja, who is part of the consultation process with U.S. Fish and Wildlife in case there's questions that pertain to those subjects.
Okay, thank you for that, and I appreciate everyone for being here this morning and being available. So with that, I'll open this to public comment. First speaker, please. Mr. Sherman.
Thank you again, and good morning, Colonel. And to you in front of me and behind me. You know, the people behind me have been, buffaloed and blindsided most of their lives, but they most certainly are not stupid. This lady to my left kept mentioning about, if you get it on your hands, you wash it off and wash it off thoroughly and wash it off with water. And then she says, but don't put it in the water system. So what do you do with the water after you wash it off with water? Is this anything at all like the poisoning of the Laguna with chemicals, and how much money did we spend on that, and how come it didn't work, and how much more money are we going to put with chemicals into a Laguna? I think these are relevant questions. She also mentioned that this has been approved by the FDA. I want to know, is this the same FDA that has presented us with food sources over the last 40 years that present us with our immune system problems? Is this the same FDA that has presented us with the exceedingly intentionally dangerous vaccines in animal flesh, which have presented and delivered an incremental genocide via cancers in this country? And if you took the numbers, they would be staggering. You know, 1 week before his assassination, JFK at Columbia stated that the office of the presidency has been used to foment a plot against the American people. And isn't it far more dangerous and interesting and amazing that the poisonous chemtrails routinely sprayed, which have decimated our bee population and presented fire accelerants to our dry fields, is not ever discussed anywhere? Is it only a rumor that the Surgeon General has declared the American public legally blind? Who ever heard of dry lightning prior to 3 weeks ago? The topic of Christmas trees, I really don't care. I mean, the holiday of the Walking Dead in service to corporate greed doesn't impress me. The concept that the light brown apple moth is a pest? Surely you jest. It's the people's greed and apathy that be the insidious worm. Still can't see through the smoke via the California burn? What to do, what to do? Adopt a new practice? How about planting living firewalls with Burbank's cactus? the most underrated food source on land. Monocropping grapes? Are we truly more stupid than apes? It's time to utilize a wisdom dance, integrating balance so as to enhance, just as they do in Europe. In between the rows are flowers, herbs, vegetables. It's called biointensive diversity, where they present a natural order of balance by controls. Twist eyes arranged as a precursor to spraying. Come on. Bats, birds, and spiders would take care of this problem far more easily than more stupid actions by people that are being paid a lot of money to do silly things.
All right, thank you. Next speaker from this side, please.
My name is Magic from Sebastopol. Actually, Sebastopol has a pesticide-free zone. San Francisco is considering creating a pesticide-free zone. We just, this whole thing makes me very sad. We just celebrated independence. I think it's time to celebrate interdependence. The pesticide industry is really the problem, not these beings. The language of wars always seems to be our solution to any problem. It's a pest, which is a derogatory term to a living being. It invades. It doesn't invade, it just lives. It doesn't attack. We don't need to create wars to continue to solve our problems. In actuality, this whole program is now under the auspices of Homeland Security. It's not even up to the state. That's why when there was a CEQA report given, they knew that it wouldn't have any effect even if it was proven to oppose this plan, because now Homeland Security is in charge of this. This is the world we're living in. The idea that rat poison is being sold, I thought was a very good point that the woman made, since we are so out of touch with reality that we actually can buy something like that that could kill us, and we put it in our yards, in which neighbor animals that aren't kept out could die, or our own children. In Chicago, there's a program called Is It Good for the Children? And I've talked about this to you before at other meetings, and I think we need to do that here, because poisons aren't good for the children. It's only been the last few years since World War II that we've even used pesticides. Farming doesn't need pesticides. We don't need to consider that an entire area of land no other being deserves to eat off of. Farmers in America used to think that 5% would go to other creatures. Now we seem to think that we can take entire swaths of this earth and nothing else deserves to eat off of it. The light brown apple moth isn't a problem. I love it like I love all beings on this planet. This is a tragedy of humanity. Pesticides are a waste product of the petroleum industry in which millions of dollars are made. You may think this one thing's safe. What about the combination of billions of tons of pesticides being poured into our air and our water? Not one person in this room can actually believe that we are taking care of our children. Can we? Please, let's shift our consciousness. I suggest you watch a movie called The 11th Hour. It might help you wake up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, from this side.
Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Smith. I'm with the California Department of Forestry Forest Pest Management section, and I've been involved in the light brown apple moth situation from the very beginning. And I want to emphasize one thing that gets lost in all this conversation, and that is the environmental impacts of doing nothing. This is an invasive. It is not native to here, and invasives can do quite a bit of damage. Look at gypsy moth on the East Coast. This particular insect does have a host range that includes a lot of species that exist here. True fir, Doug fir, coast redwood, the pines. The Department of Fish and Game is very concerned about the impacts that this might have on some of the rare and endangered species that are on its host list. It could kill them, it could cause them to go extinct. There are also rare and endangered insect species that feed on hosts on the list of the light brown apple moth as well. I also want to emphasize the fact that a lot of riparian species are on this list. The maples, the willows, These are things that help to shade our streams to protect the salmon populations. Salmon need cool water, you remove the shade, the water temperatures increase, the salmon species die, and we're already losing our salmon species in the state. Also add to the fact that here in Sonoma County, we are dealing with a variety of other invasive species doing damage. The pine pitch canker disease, Monterey pine is a host. Sudden oak death is doing a huge amount of damage in the state. The oaks and various other hardwoods are hosts of this as well. Between fragmentation, invasive species, pollution, urbanization, you could be pushing our forests to the tipping point where they can't recover at all. So please do look at the environmental impacts of doing nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, from this side.
Smoke and mirrors, let's make it clear, it's called a general strike. California is the most
Peter,
powerful state in the
quiet,
world,
please.
and it's time for us to do as Harry
Yes, sir.
Bridges did and
Right
shut it
ahead.
down, and then we work on solutions.
I'm Steve Hill, a grape grower in Sonoma Valley since 1979. I'm also an employer, a resident, and a parent, and I want my environment to be as safe as is reasonably attainable all the time. However, you could argue about this pest. You could also argue about the control of the pest. But because of the statutes written by the state of California, we have no time to do that. We're at the 23rd hour. And I want to make sure that everyone in this room understands that the protocol for a grape grower within the Sonoma Valley, within the quarantine area right now, is that if they find moths or larvae within my vineyard or with any other peer vineyard within 30 days of harvest, then they can quarantine those grapes so that they cannot be taken out of the quarantine area. Well, this theoretically has tremendous economic impact for this area. It's determined there's 2,500 acres of grapes. There are certain people in this room that may not care about that. Certain other people in this room that may not understand. They may think 2,500 acres is not very much. Well, in quick math, the 2,500 acres very conservatively adds up to $75 million in gross wine sales from the 2,500 acres of grapes. So the risk of doing nothing is truly significant. And I would encourage, in the future, trying to rewrite these rules that the state has imposed on this quarantine so that they more closely resemble a high-value crop in Sonoma Valley as opposed to growing tomatoes in Turlock. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, from this side.
I'm ceding my time to Max Ventura. She's speaking for our group.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Maxina Ventura from Bell Spray, California. First of all, 3 handouts for you all. Pass them along. The handouts are the label. You may not have seen the label, so you have a chance to look at the label for isomate LBAM+. The next is alternatives, of which there are several alternatives used in New Zealand. But I want to start off today by objecting to the fact that twist ties and traps of any kind of synthetic pheromones have been brought in here. There was a very specific request to Ms. Brown and also Robert Leavitt of CDFA that none of those be brought in here. As a result, my temperature has dropped because I'm chemically sensitive due to pesticide poisoning. I am on the verge of an asthma attack, even with 2 layers of carbon filtration. I'm feeling pins and needles in my feet and legs, which indicates that my blood sugar levels have probably skyrocketed, which is what happens with pesticide exposures for many people. And my blood pressure, I can feel, has risen. Normally, when not exposed, it's considered great and it skyrockets under exposures. So it's outrageous that they're in here. It's outrageous that any kinds were allowed to be out in the hallway, making a hallway also a difficult place for people to be. Now, I lived for many years out in Shellville, out in the Carneros. My older children and I we were pesticide poisoned by the typical vineyard sprayings out here. This to me is very personal. You've gotten emails from me and information, certainly. But one thing jumped out at me, that photograph of what looked like typical bunch rot. Well, so now they're representing this as being light brown apple moth issue. Now, in the early 90s, we all know around here, early 90s, mid 90s on, so many people moved in here growing grapes, and they started planting closer together than ever. And then, of course, had all these bunch rot problems. And then what was their response? Even more use of fungicides, which were making people sick. So the Food Quality Protection Act of 1996 stated that and pointed out that, in fact, there are many probable and possible carcinogens which had not been adequately tested because of tests that were insensitive in the past and needed to be retested. So now, here we are all these years later, a couple years after that Food Quality Protection Act had passed, saying 300 had to be retested just for carcinogenicity. Only about 11 had been tested. I don't know the newest numbers now, but I think we can all do the math to look at what the intention might have been or not. So when you're hearing about testing here from OEHA and CDFA, I'd like you to do some questioning of them about the kinds of tests they've conducted. Are there any long-term tests done here? Now, the risk assessment model is what's being used. The risk assessment model looks at me, looks at my children, and looks at every person.
Ma'am, your time is up, please, so could you conclude?
So the risk assessment,
3 minutes of mine.
another 3 minutes of
We don't, I'm sorry, we don't do that here. I thought I made it very clear. Each
Right.
individual would have 3 minutes,
Well,
that's it.
Robert Leavitt
3
told me
minutes
yesterday.
is up. Would you please conclude and let the next person speak?
I will then ask somebody to let me see, and I will conclude
We don't
this.
do that here. Each individual has 3 minutes, period. Your 3 minutes is up.
We were told elsewise. Is there any Board of Supervisor here who would like to make an exception?
No, I don't see anyone.
Well, you're playing a shell game if you think that with the risk assessment model it's okay, because it's all going to
Thank
end up
you.
with
Next
sick people
speaker,
and public
please.
health.
Next speaker, please, from over here.
So I've got notes for anybody who would like
Thank
to review
you.
some other issues. And I was told by CDFA this time to be seated, so you should know that.
Ma'am, you're disrupting this proceedings. I suggest that if you feel your health is at risk, whether it be real or imagined, you maybe leave these chambers.
Whoa, that's outrageous.
Hey,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
How dare you? Americans with Disability Act. How
Go ahead, sir.
unbelievable.
Will Schoen.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Sonoma Valley, good morning. Some questions. What was the determination of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as to whether there are any endangered species in the creek that runs through one of the Sonoma Valley neighborhoods? And will that determination document be made public? It's my understanding that the product used on the LBAM twist ties is isomate LBAM plus. It states on the label of this product under hazards to humans and domestic animals to, quote, avoid contact with skin, eyes, or clothing, harmful if absorbed through skin, causes moderate eye irritation, end quote. The label also cautions under environmental hazards to, quote, not apply directly to water or to areas where surface water is present. Question, can CDFA assure that there will be no harmful effects to human or animal health if there is contact with the twist ties? For example, children climbing trees where twist ties have been placed, or domestic cats coming in contact with and then transferring the product to humans. Further states on the label to, quote, remove contaminated clothing, to wash skin for 15 to 20 minutes, and to contact a poison control center if there's contact with the product. Question, what if there are no adults around and children come in contact with the product? Question, have residents of the quarantined areas been told the health hazards of the twist ties as described on the official MSDS sheet? Have residents been informed of the fact that there are a number of undisclosed ingredients in the twist ties? To my knowledge, there has been no long-term testing of these twist ties in urban areas. How has CDFA determined that it is safe to use them? According to some scientific reports, the use of non-toxic pheromone-baited hanging sticky traps
is a more effective method of reducing LBAM populations. Question: why was the use of toxic twist ties chosen over the sticky tabs? Final question: will there be a scoping session as per CEQA guidelines for public information regarding the LBAM ground application program with an opportunity for questions or concerns from the public? I have copies of these I'd like to submit to you.
All right, thank you. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Gurick, and I've been working on this issue for probably 6 to 8 months, and I have a science background. The formulation, the inert ingredients that they say are proprietary, we pretty well know what they are because the manufacturer had to use them in the LBAM spray, and due to a legal effort and a number of other threats, they finally did have to expose what those were. So I'll just read you two that were mentioned here in the presentation. One of them is the one that is the antioxidant, the preservative. The one they're most likely using is BHT. BHT, I'll read you. Now, that was the one that was attacked, and I know one of the scientists was trying to work on a reformulation. BHA would be a better substitute because it's less harmful. But this one, okay, this compound, a preservative, is banned for use in food in Japan, Romania, Sweden, and Australia. The US has barred it in infant foods. It is well known that infants will be both breathe and ingest this chemical. Okay, and so hopefully they've substituted this one. I know that was one they were under attack for, and they might have, but maybe not. The other one that comes up a lot, there are many, is the UV blocker. And the one that they're choosing to use is a very good UV blocker, and it is, as the scientist said, less estrogenic. It's less of a hormone disruptor, but it's still in the class of hormone disruptors. And there are benzopheramines. The one they're probably using is 2-hydroxy. The bad thing about it is, there's 6 other ones that are more estrogenic than this, that are used in sunscreen. But the major problem with this, it's non-biodegradable. And the material data safety sheet specifically says that it is non-biodegradable and to not use it in an environment where that would be important. And you certainly don't want to be breathing it if it's non-biodegradable. The other thing I want to speak to briefly is the issue of quarantine. I feel so sorry for the farmers here. In counties where I spoke to, the subcontractors on this issue are the county agricultural entities. They tell us secretly that when they find this, if CDFA isn't called, they have them just cut and bag the thing completely and dispose of. So they cut several branches, make sure it's completely contained, because the quarantine is so draconian, it's such an overreaction, it's so harmful to agriculture. And this is all done. The light brown apple moth in Santa Cruz is a major infestation. But CDFA can show no crop damage there, and there's plenty of agriculture there. Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next speaker, please.
My name is Suzanne, and I recognize some people. I was hoping from a call for you from the toxology, but to answer some of my questions I didn't get. So I'm still a little bit confused. I live in the area where we're going to get quarantined, and I've spoken with you, Valerie, thank you. A lot of my neighbors were not able to attend. So
And did you identify yourself?
Oh, am I supposed to?
For the record,
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
I'm Suzanne G.D. Ring, and I live in one of the quarantine areas. And my main concern is for my children. I've heard information, but I still am not quite clear. This is a 24-hour-a-day exposure, every breath they take. I'm not clear how it is. If it breaks down in water, it's, when you breathe it, gets in your mucous membranes, it's dissolving. How is our body metabolizing it? It's children. the work that I have found on the toxicology is mostly for workers and bystanders, and workers and bystanders are not infants and children. This is a 24-hour-a-day exposure, every breath that they take. At first I was just concerned about the trees because my children are in the trees all the time. We have tree fort, and I said, okay, well, for our country and our community, I'll try to keep them out of the trees for 2 years. And I thought, oh my goodness. And again, this is not a one-time exposure. It's until 2 life cycles after the last moth or some stage of it is found. So it could be over 2 to 3 years. Oh, and when I'm thinking about it, when I talked to Stefan, agriculture? Well, he said that it was, when you said that it was successfully eradicated in Napa but from the twist type, but he told me that it was also because they used other ground sprays and stuff on it. So my main concern is the air that they breathe, how do they metabolize it? This is not a one-time exposure. They are children. What I read from the rats, I extrapolated from the cotton moth information that Dr. Dow sent me. It just said that when they increase the atmospheric concentration of this, that they survive for 14 days. But it didn't say anything else, so that really didn't give me the peace and comfort that I was hoping information to find. So the rats survive for 14 days. Now these are also heat dependent, so I don't know if you know, but like in the BoS area, we plummet over 100 degrees. So apparently if they go to 85, they should be dead. The pheromones are releasing their stuff when it's really hot and the moths are sleeping. So at night when the moths are doing their thing, the pheromones are like barely being effective. So the risk benefit, even if you did do it, doesn't make sense. Also our yard clippings from the packet they were given, they're supposed to be carried out in special ways. That's not happening because there's all kinds of different landscape people. So that's not in place. Also I called the public health to see but the public health department is not informed, and either of the physicians, and the packet said that they would be, and that hasn't happened yet.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, board members. I'm Ellen Faulkner. I'm from Redwood Valley in Mendocino County. Broad spectrum sprays, endocrine disruptors, and the like are nearing the end of their existence as agricultural pesticides. They have to be phased out. Integrated pest management, or IPM, is a strong and necessary move toward getting our forest farms and fisheries rid of these toxins. Researcher Arnon Shani has observed that IPM is a response to humanity's need to maintain a reasonable standard of living while preserving the environment. To accommodate the move to IPM, the chemical industry will inevitably have to close production lines, cut down acquisitions and sales volumes, and adopt new ways of thinking. The alternative means destroying the environment with our own hands and destroying the quality of life. There is widespread support for IPM in Mendocino County. Our agricultural department gives awards to farmers who come up with innovative ways to control pests. In my search for information, I heard an intriguing anecdote that relates to the search for and discovery of pheromones for pest control. The story goes like this. One day in the 60s or 70s, a college student living on his own was doing his own housekeeping. He used an ammoniated soap powder for cleaning. He happened to leave the wash water outside overnight, and in the morning, he found it covered with moths. The ammonia in the water must have been the attractant because research since has shown that many insect pheromones to be ammonia-based. No doubt others had noticed the same phenomenon, and as a result of subsequent research and development, synthetically produced pheromones have become commercially available. I checked with the Farm Bureau in Mendocino County about pheromones. They stress the need to phase out organochlorines. They also support IPM and the use of a manufactured pheromone to help control codling moths in the Ukiah Valley pear orchards. I checked with pear farmers themselves. Because they are very concerned with quality of life, they are more than willing to step off the pesticide treadmill. They are all working with IPM. All employ the codling moth pheromone set out in hanging dispensers. to trap and monitor the insect and to confuse its mating process. These growers have been using the codling moth pheromone for over a decade now with good results. They have been able to sharply reduce the use of sprays in their orchards. Manufactured pheromones have been in use for quite a while. Should we panic about pheromones now? Is there some sort of fear of success?
Ma'am, your time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. Ned Hill. I'm a grape grower in the Sonoma Valley, and my own personal vineyards and one vineyard that I manage does fall within the quarantine area. You heard from my father earlier. To echo the concerns of a grape grower within the area, and also to echo my father, I do believe and would very much enjoy CDFA taking a closer look at the process, obviously of the quarantine that we are now under, and possibly are reviewing that whole process. As it stands right now, I don't believe that we're in an eradication phase. I think that's a pretty dangerous word. I think we're still in an exclusion phase. If you remember when we were talking about the glasswing sharpshooter, if a pest isn't around, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to spray for it. You don't have to worry about the pheromones. You don't have to worry about anything. I do believe that it's unfortunate some time has been lost since the trappings of the two male moths quite a few months ago, and the opportunity has been given for them to continue mating. I'm not real worried about the findings of a couple of moths in Sonoma and the fact that maybe they're actually there and we're into an eradication program yet. And the unfortunate thing is being under a quarantine order that we cannot allow even the opportunity of a moth, and in this case they're searching for the larva, to be found in our vineyard during these inspections that are going to happen 30 days to harvest. Therefore, with all the talk of chemicals, we are treating our vineyards with synthetic and organic compounds. The advantage with the Lepidoptera pest is for both the larva and the adults, between pheromones for the adults and very specific organic and synthetic chemicals for the larva. We can get pretty specific treating Lepidoptera, but the fact remains that we're treating 2 to 3 times what we normally would not be, and that's unfortunate. That's not a position in the vineyard that we would like to be in. So I do, for the extent possible, I definitely feel for homeowners who are in a situation where they, number one, are allowing people on their property. Number two, are being asked to put these pheromones out. I absolutely understand their position. But we're all in the same position with us under this eradication order as well. So I look forward to further review of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Anne Maurice, Ad Hoc Committee for Clean Water. In Sonoma County, the right to farm has for many years been synonymous with the right to spray pesticides. And one of the biggest controversies that we had going here maybe 6 years or so ago was regarding pesticide overspray. And we've got an interface here in the county of rural residents, rural residential properties, and agricultural properties. And most of us who live here want to keep it that way. We want to keep our agriculture local, we want to keep agriculture thriving, and we want to support it here, but we also want to not have to deal with pesticides. So where's the problem come from? It's because most of us want cheap agricultural produce, and we want it year-round. So if we want it year-round, I think some of us are so accustomed to seeing strawberries in the wintertime that we forget that there is such a thing as in-season. And we're not really looking at the labels to see where these things are coming from. So if we want our produce this way, we're relying on imports. So not only are we importing agricultural produce, but by necessity or by design or by nature, we're going to be importing pests. So we can't exactly have our cake and eat it too. We have to deal with agricultural pests. So what we need to do now is to take a look at the options here. Take a look at these pests that we're importing. And one of the exciting things that a previous speaker talked about is integrated pest management, or IPM. And I don't know if that's a household word for us, and I don't know, and certainly pheromones are not a household word for me, and neither is organochlorines. But organochlorines are toxic pesticides that kill off beneficial insects as well as the target pests, and that was the subject of the controversy and the aerial spray that we've been talking about here for a long time. That's what growers have wanted to get off of. That's the pesticide treadmill, they call it. Residents have wanted to get them off of it. So I'm looking at pheromones, and I had to look into this because I had not heard of them and I didn't know what they were. And I think most urban residents aren't familiar with them either. And I think it's important to distinguish between pheromones, meaning attractants and lures and mating disruptors, distinguishing them from insecticides. And to me, it looks like there is a possibility of a win-win situation here for all of us. If it's possible to hang a lure and confuse mating for an insect, and in the process get rid of toxic pesticide spray, that looks to me like something I want to look into and keep on the table. What do I want to get off the table is aerial pesticide spray. That is for sure. I think that should go out with high button shoes. We don't need it. We had a problem. So now somebody said somewhere that out of crisis comes opportunity. So maybe we can move away from aerial pesticide spray and we can look at some of these other options. So what I did is I went around to Friselinas and to Harmony, because I live in Sebastopol and I have to go to these places anyway to get feed for my pigs. And what did I find? I found a whole array of pheromone lure attractants that have to do with flies and yellow jackets and so forth. And I put them on display outside and I hope people will look into it. And nobody mentioned the CEQA process. Please mention that. Please explain to people the upcoming scoping sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you identify yourself for the record? You did.
Sorry, okay, Ad Hoc Committee for Clean Water.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Next speaker, please. Over here.
Good morning, Supervisors. Frank Ager, 13 Meadowway in Fairfax, and with Stop the Spray we're in. My family has been established in Sonoma County since the 20s, and I'm a Sonoma County property owner. The CDFA PowerPoint presentation that they continue to show, there was a photo up there of a bunch of rotting Chardonnay grapes. And this is their constant scare tactic when they go into agricultural communities. The photo you saw was taken in Australia in 1992. This moth does not eat grapes. It doesn't eat redwood trees. The CDFA says if we can't treat your community, we will quarantine your crops. That is an absolute threat that this Board of Supervisors should say it's unacceptable. We're not going to allow you to come into Sonoma County and threaten us with quarantines. I was in the courtroom in Monterey when Judge O'Farrell questioned the Deputy Attorney General defending the California Department of Food and Ag in the lawsuit down there. And the judge said to the Deputy AG, can you show me the damage in California from this moth? And the Deputy AG said, well, no, Your Honor, I can't. I don't have that information with me today. You know, the end ruling down in Monterey, which they are now appealing, CDFA is appealing, said there's no damage. There's no need to treat Monterey. One question that has been asked is, what is the disposal method of pesticides? They said they're going to put out 250 per acre, and then they're going to pick them up in 90 to I don't know how many days. How will they dispose of them? Will they go in your landfill in Sonoma County, or will they go to a hazardous site? You read a letter describing a sterile moth program where they're going to dump 20 million moths per day every 7 to 14 days in some of our counties. Right now there's about 25,000 moths in California. And they want to dump 20 million a day every 7 to 14 days in some of our counties. They're going to create the problem. They're going to create the damage. They're going to create havoc if they think they can dump 20 million moths out of an airplane flying over our cities. The CDFA told you that they have no plans to aerial spray Sonoma County. No plans. They didn't say they will never aerial spray Sonoma County. They didn't say they won't ground spray Sonoma County. The twist ties are absolutely unnecessary. The whole program is unnecessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Roy Upton. I represent an organization called Citizens for Health, and we're focused on public health and environmental health. I came up actually from Santa Cruz this morning, we're in the spray zone, of course, and predominantly delivered 3 messages. One is that the premise of putting these twist ties into residential areas is based on emergency that both the Monterey and Santa Cruz court said didn't exist. We are in the middle of the most densest population of LBAM, and our farms are surrounding it, and there are no LBAM in those agricultural areas of any significance whatsoever. Second is that Myself and a number of colleagues just reviewed more than 100 papers, scientific papers on the biology of LBAM, and I can clearly say that LBAM doesn't represent the moth of mass destruction as has been alleged by USDA and CDFA. Their action was an overreaction based on a quarantine or a listing of this pest on a list from literally from 1957. And it will not do any significant damage to any native flora or trees whatsoever. The picture that you saw is anomalous. Insects can live on trees, that's not an issue. They only affect trees that are 6 meters high or under 6 meters high. After 3 years, the trees are resistant to LBAM, and after 4 years, there's no damage whatsoever, even when the moth was on those trees. So there's no danger whatsoever to native flora and trees. Last thing is, our biggest thing is we don't believe pesticide application should be in residential areas unless there's a real need, and the real need has not been shown in this case. LBAM in Australia and New Zealand are extremely minor pests, and actually of interest to ag people here, especially in the vineyards. Last year, 2007, Bald Hill Vineyards in New Zealand actually won the Protected Planet Sustainability Award, as well as the best Pinot Noir in their class, because of their biological controls of pests such as LBAM. This is the direction we should be going in. Definitely Sonoma growers should be going in. That was the most prestigious wine competition in the world, and their biological controls show that they can control LBAM without pesticides. So that's our biggest issue, is not with the efficacy or the safety of the twist ties, it's whether or not they belong in residential areas, and we say absolutely not, they should not. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Could I provide any information?
You leave it with the clerk. She'll get it to us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Darby, and I'm the chair of Stop the Spray San Francisco. And I just wanted to make some comments on the presentation that the CDFA did. And I wanted to talk about that light brown apple moth, specifically in that it's a leaf roller moth. And the CDFA has stated that it affects 2,000 plants, and I just want to let you guys know how they came to that number. They looked at plants that the moth was seen on, not necessarily eating at all, plants that were related to the plants the moth was seen on, and various distant relatives to the plants that are related to the plants that the moth was seen on. That's how they came up with the number of 2,000 plants. So this moth is a polyphagous plant. It eats lots of different things. It does not really specialize in one fruit or vegetable. It's native to Australia. It invaded New Zealand about 100 years ago. New Zealand has a similar climate to the Bay Area, which is why it's sort of found itself here. Dr. James Carey from UC Davis has estimated that based on migratory patterns of the light brown apple moth, it's been here for 30 to 50 years. So it's not a new invasive pest. New Zealand only controls for it because it wants its shipments to be accepted into the United States. Europe does not quarantine for this pest at all. Our ecosystem is probably already handling this pest quite effectively. We have natural predators just like they do in New Zealand, and those are spiders, lacewings, birds, trigger grandma moths. I think I said that right. In the USDA's own risk assessment says that the light brown apple moth does not reproduce in temperatures above 88 degrees or in temperatures below 47 degrees. It's going to get pretty warm here today, so I would imagine that just the climate itself would help keep this moth in check in Sonoma County. I'm basically pointing this out because I think it's important that you guys have the information available to you that this program is not necessary. The light brown apple moth has caused no damage in California, and we really need to revisit and look at how we deal with invasive species in our country, especially ones that cause no damage. So that's about it. I think I finished before my time was up.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Next speaker, please. Yes, sir.
Can you pass those out to the...
Yeah, we'll get those out.
Okay.
If you
My name is Glenn Chase. I'm a professor of systems management. My specialty areas are environmental economics and statistics.
I want to talk about OEHA's report that they put out, that this is the organization that this lady's from. The results and discussion on page 4, it's in yellow. Please turn to page 4. You can see it highlighted. It says, quote, "It is not possible."
Sherry, excuse me, can you give these copies to them as well? I think we've got extras.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Sure. "It is not possible to determine whether or not there is a link between any of the reported symptoms in the aerial spraying." So it basically says they can't tell whether there is a link or whether there isn't a link. It's inconclusive. However, this is OEHA's press release. Quote, a study released by state health officials showed that there was no conclusive link between the light brown apple moth spraying and the reported illnesses last fall in Monterey and Santa Cruz County. We examined all of the complaints and it was not possible to link the reported symptoms to the aerial spraying, said OEHA Director Joan Denton. So you notice they couldn't find the link nor deny the link, but they only reported that they couldn't find the link. That's the kind of honesty or lack of honesty that this organization and the CDFA has been demonstrating throughout the process. To see if it's gone any further, finally the CDFA in their recent June 19th Q&A said, quote, "Our health officials did not find a link between the spraying and reported illnesses." That's not in fact the case. The eradication program in total is a fraudulent program. It is based on 3 falsehoods: that LBAM causes significant and overwhelming damage to crops, forests, and backyard gardens, that LBAM recently arrived in California, that CDFA has the tools to eradicate it. In fact, the moth does no damage, as you've heard others speak so eloquently today. The moth has been here in California at least 30 to 50 years, and the moth cannot be eradicated any more than ants or cockroaches. It's simply too widespread. The motivation for the doom scenario is simply an emergency funding, about $500 million over a 5-year period, and then the possibility of another $500 million over another 5 years.
30 seconds.
The proof of the falsehood is this: if 100,000 moths will do damage, then you all know that 5,000 moths will do 5% of the damage. And there is no damage, and you all know here that any number times 0 is still 0. And I'll finish with this. The further proof of the falsehood is as follows. CDFA claimed the window of opportunity to eradicate in 2007, 2008 was only months, and that's why they aerially sprayed without an EIR. Now, they've come along and said they have a new sterile moth release program that will be fully operational in 2011. That's 3 years from now, and that's completely inconsistent with what their initial statements have been, and they haven't brought that to your attention at all. So now we've got 3 years.
Sir, your time is up.
I'd like to make just one sentence as you took my time to pass it over to the lady.
Go ahead, one sentence.
When the goal of a program is invalid, it follows that all aspects and part of the program are invalid, since they are all intended to achieve an invalid goal. Therefore, aerial spray, sterile moth release, twist ties, ground foggers, splat, and specifically for your benefit, twist ties is invalid because it's intended for an eradication that is fraudulent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Helen Kazoris, and I work with Stop the Spray East Bay in Alameda County. Thank you for inviting public comment on the LBAM eradication program and the proposed twist tie application in Sonoma County. I came here today to voice my opposition to the entire eradication program. My opinions are based on sound science, which tells us the eradication program is not safe, effective, or necessary. Number one, is it safe? We know that people got sick after the sprayings in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. There are 643 documented complaints of acute adverse health effects, such as difficulty breathing, irritation of the eyes, throat, and skin, lung congestion, shortness of breath, wheezing, coughing, and asthma attacks. Jack Wilcox, an 11-month-old baby from Pacific Grove, almost died after being sprayed twice with 2 different chemical formulations of Checkmate, OLRF and LBAM-F. He was a previously healthy child and is now on medication for asthma. To this day, the people of Monterey County still do not know the complete chemical formulation of Checkmate OLRF or the long-term health effects of the pheromone sprays.
CDFA continues to deny that the illness complaints were caused by the spray. In fact, OEHA's report states, quote, "It is not possible to determine whether or not there is a link between any of the reported symptoms and the aerial spraying." OEHA issued this statement after analyzing less than 10% of the illness complaints, and not one individual or physician was contacted. CDFA takes it a step further by saying OEHA's report, quote, "proves there is no link between the spraying and the adverse health effects." In addition to the harm caused to humans by the spray, there were also reports of pet illnesses and deaths, wildlife die-off, which included 650 dead seabirds found immediately after the spraying, stories of bees disappearing from gardens, and the worst red tide ever recorded in Santa Cruz. CDFA claimed the spray was safe, but in reality it was incredibly harmful, and yet they still intend to spray agricultural and forested areas. Can we trust the CDFA when they tell us the twist ties are safe, or the permethrin goo that is planned to be applied to utility poles and trees in our communities? Number two, is it effective? Dr. James Carey, a prominent entomologist specializing in invasion biology, has come forward to say that it is impossible for LBAM to be a recent arrival. The moth inhabits over 10,000 square miles from Napa to Los Angeles, and he estimates it has been living in California for 30 to 50 years based on its widespread distribution.
30 seconds.
Dr. Carey says the eradication program will simply not work because LBAM is too entrenched within the California ecosystem. And obviously my talk is way too long for the time that I have allowed, so I'm just going to go to my conclusions. We stand at a fork in the road. We can choose to continue down the path using CDFA's toxic toolbox for pest control and food production, which includes the twist ties, or replace an outdated approach with truly sustainable agriculture by adopting IPM best practices similar to New Zealand, thereby ensuring a healthy food supply and less toxic environment for all. The choice is ours to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Grace Sievertson, and I've been working with the Stop Spray Marin.org since March when I got involved with the LBAM issue. I'm looking at this, all the comments that have been made so far, and I want to kind of comment on the general overall comments. But before I do that, I want to say that apparently from the input we have here, the eradication plan has appeared not fully thought out because of all the public outcry that's happened now and our experiences with Santa Cruz and Monterey and the downside of all this. So I do encourage all of you to pause, think about the precautionary principle, the long-term effects, the short-terms, and all the comments that have been made by people who have experienced the downside of this eradication program, and whether or not continuing with the Fairmont twist ties. You know, there's a lot of questions about what happens to it with the children, with touching it, the amount that's going to be out in the area, you know, how many are there, and then what do you do with the disposable parts? Someone brought that up. Also, I wanted to make a comment. When you had the slide up there was a Dr. Dan Harder. He was mentioned on the slide visual up there. Well, Dr. Dan Harder and Dr. James Carey both work with UC. They have indicated, again, I'll say this has been inputted before, that the light brown apple moth has been here between 30 and 50 years and apparently has not caused any major damage. However, we do have the agriculture industry consideration and the monies. There's a lot of players here who have different stakes and different issues that are on the table. Monetary, environmental, health, etc. So, and then there's the issue of this whole program that we're working under is a model that we have. The model we're working under with the pesticide as the use is the industrialized farming, how we use pesticides and the continuation of it and the sustainability of this kind of program. How long can we sustain this? There has to be a pause and a deep reflection on the model we're using, because we have all this downside effect. It's costing a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and we're at a crisis in our global weather environment. We can't go on having these hearings over and over again and spending and using all this energy when we have larger issues here. We've got to deal with this. We have to have a public forum and have all the players on the table, the state, the agriculture, the activists, the people who have gotten sick, and have a transparent discussion for the public to see what this pesticide attitude and model is really doing to us as a species and in our relationship with nature. Do we want to have a more, are we leaving our children a toxic environment, more of it, or less of a toxic environment with these kind of eradication plans and our attitude toward pesticide use for the species?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. Thanks for this hearing. My name is Mike DeLay. I live in Pacific Grove.
Pull the microphone. Yeah, just pull it up a little bit. I don't know if that podium will raise. There's a button over there on the right. It'll go up and down. Yeah, I'll bring it up a little bit.
That's as far.
I think that's about it.
I'll speak closer. My name is Mike DeLay. I live in Pacific Grove. I'm the coordinator of the California Cities to Stop the Spray. We're the group that encouraged 31 cities to become involved and informed on the LBAM issue. What I discovered in our process, which is really what we tried to do, was just inform, ask councils like yourselves to become informed and involved, was as you did so, the light of truth came forth and it exposed CDFA's misinformation. And as such, 31 councils like yourself, with the information that was given by them, given by various people here, came to that similar conclusion and passed resolutions to oppose. And as observation, another thing I wanted to say too is, my wife and I are one of the 643 families that were reported ill. We're in that report, we're documented as such. And the lady before me mentioned the symptoms. She did a very good job of what we experienced, especially on the first spray, which we don't know what it was. We became very ill, our town suffered for months. There are still people having effects of it today. If you go there and walk around neighborhoods, you can find people that are suffering from various unknown illnesses that they've never had before. I'm a very healthy person. I don't take any prescriptions. I have a history of no illness, but since the spray, I have been chronically ill on and off, and I can't explain it. Lots of weakness, lots of lethargy that have occurred. That is not uncommon in our town. That is a common statement, and honestly, I have no idea what to expect, because you can't get information from CDFA or OHIA or DPR or any of the organizations as to what we should expect from this, because frankly, they don't know. That's the other problem with it. Another observation I noticed was 2 farmers came in here. The elderly man, he said that, what caught my mind was, he said that we don't care about them. And the fact of the matter is, we do care about them. That's why we're here. Because we see this program as a farce, as false. It needs to be, it's a failure program. It's been totally exposed. I mean, if anybody takes a step back and looks at it, it's exposed. We care because we ask that the pest be reclassified from an A to a C, which eliminates quarantine and takes the threat off of them. The other son that said so, his comments were just right on. I enjoyed what he had to say to this committee. I have a few seconds left. Basically, our program is now, we have not given up. We are continuing to ask to inform councils and cities, inform people, get them involved, so that this program can be totally opposed and eliminated. That's our goals, and that's our request. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm going to try to speak, since you didn't allow me to cede my time to the person I work with in Don'tSprayCalifornia.org. My name is Isis Farrell. And I would like to, since people have been talking about people getting sick in Santa Cruz and Monterey County, I would like to point out to you all that the active ingredient that was coming out of those planes is the exact same ingredient in the twist ties that you should not have brought here because you've made me ill with it. And they're the same in the traps and in the stuff that they're planning on putting on utility poles in some of the cities. It is not a tested or registered pesticide. And the CDFA, some of the CDFA people would like to tell you that it's not a pesticide at all. It is registered as a pesticide. It's not registered, excuse me, it is classified as a pesticide by the EPA. And under FIFRA, the EPA has done excuse me, my brain is not working very well with all the fumes in here. I'm not doing very well. That's why I wanted my friend to speak for me. The EPA decided on their quarantine under the law that is about pesticides, the FIFA law. I think that's pretty much all I would like to say. I would like to remind you that it is a pesticide. It is the same pesticide that has made other people ill. This antioxidant that you're talking about over here, you know, I think that we know a lot about that actually. BHT, somebody has mentioned that, is considered an antioxidant, and it is hazardous to human health. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just a question to the EPA representative, if I might.
Sure.
People have been talking about bringing the twist ties in here. I thought I saw you indicate they were in a sealed plastic container. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
I'm still sick.
And my apologies, I didn't realize that was what had been agreed upon.
Good morning, Colleen Canal, Santa Rosa. To paraphrase Joni Mitchell, don't mind the spots on my apples, just give me the birds and the bees, please. I haven't really heard much definitive report on testing that's been done with any of these ingredients around the bees. And we know how critical the bees are for our agricultural economics. I would also like to point out that Sonoma County is 95% rural. Would also like to point out that you're saying this is a decision left to the state entirely. Well, it's because of the outcry of the citizens that we've put a hold, at least, on the aerial spraying, that our elected representatives, such as Huffman and Micken, have responded because they heard the outcry. Well, the outcry doesn't have to just be from the general public. And I would really, really appreciate if all of you supervisors would do a little bit more of your own research and not just assume that everything that's put before you is automatically correct. I'd really like to see you use your critical thinking skills and to do as I am trying to do, which is wait and listen to what everyone has to say and not prejudge. I'd like you to research toxins associated with putting fluoride in the drinking water. I'd really like you to explore chemical sensitivity. This is not necessarily an imagined scenario. Supervisor Kearns, you and I could walk down to Long's drugstore, we could go into the perfume and cologne counters, and we could legally purchase many carcinogenic ingredients contained within those perfumes. They're trade secrets. How in the world do we let trade secrets trump public health safety? Well, it's happened, and it's why lung cancer is one of the leading diseases that we have. There are untold numbers of combinations of synthetic ingredients that are killing us. That's why the EPA isn't moving to green chemistry. So in talking with some of these people, I asked about solutions. And one of these solutions that are here are planting certain crops, like in between the rows of the vines, and letting the parasitic wasp that's a host for them to come to take care of these invasive species. And they also will take care of some of the other unsavory ones like the grassling sharpshooter. So I appreciate the steps at being less toxic. We need to go all the way to being as pristine and back to nature as possible and bring the balance back. That's going to bring your economic balance where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Gina Kuklas, and I live in the quarantine zone. I don't live in the neighborhood slated for twist ties, but I ended up deciding to get up and speak at this meeting because I was concerned about the lack of actual residents from the quarantine zone here today. And so I want to tell you about my community and why they aren't here today. It's where the working people of the Sonoma Valley live and where the families of the Sonoma Valley live. It is an urbanized area within unincorporated community. The people are at work. The moms would have to have childcare to come here today. And my concern about this is the lack of education. I want to thank Supervisor Valerie Brown for having this meeting today. There was the time for the meeting because CDFA decided to delay putting up the twist ties because of concern about potential endangered species in the creek. Not because of concern that there's been proper outreach and education to the parents in the neighborhood affected by the twist ties. These are neighborhoods dominated by children. I think that it is important to have objective information provided, that there is extensive community meetings and times for the parents to be educated and understand they have the right to decide, I'm okay with this, or no, I'm concerned and I don't want one of these tied in my backyard where my little children play. So I just hope we respect that fact, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time for this hearing. My name is Lisa Chipkin. I'm a resident of San Rafael and coordinator for Stop the Spray Marin. I'm also the stepmother of an 11-year-old, very active and avid tree climber. And I can only imagine if these were to go up in trees around our house in our county that where it's very hard to keep him out of trees, and then to have him, be curious, touch, and then get down. To have him wash his hands is always difficult enough, but then and then keeping them out of his face and his mouth, So I'm concerned. There hasn't been any damage, and with the level of infestation in Santa Cruz and Monterey, to not see any damage yet, and yet to still rush into the violent act of poisoning thousands of people, pets, children, wildlife, and rushing to eradicate just seems nonsensical. And I would like to urge that we really take the time to look at all the issues, to study the science, and to pause, to put a moratorium on the whole program. I appreciate the CDFA and the Department of Agriculture's concern for lessening the level of toxic pesticides, more toxic pesticides. We're definitely at a tipping point in our bodies and on the planet. There are more and more studies coming out showing the toxic body burden of chemicals in people of all ages, all across the United States and the world. And we've got to stop dumping chemicals into our environment. The twist ties are less visibly dramatic than the aerial spray, yet we do not know what the long-term repeated exposure to the chemicals, the inerts, will be. The chemicals have been compared to those that are in flea collars, and the inerts compared to things that are used in sunscreens and foods. And yet, just because they're approved by the FDA doesn't mean that repeated exposure through the products that we use every day, sunscreens, lotions, candles with fragrances, all of these things are starting to show up as being toxic and leading to more and more incidences of asthma and cancers and ADD and all kinds of things, illness. We're just creating a more and more weak and susceptible population, and we're doing the same thing with our environment, creating a weak and susceptible environment so that we can be more susceptible to damage from all kinds of quote-unquote pests. So I encourage us to pause and then also to, move back towards more balance with biodiversity in farming and planting natives, encouraging planting natives in landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Lynn Elliott Harding, and I'm here from several different perspectives. I'm a registered nurse. I'm a mother. I grew up on a farm. I'm from two long lines of farmers. I spent 10 years in 4-H, so I really do care about the farmers. I do understand something about the burden that they're under, and I believe that the greatest threat to them is the quarantine and the light brown apple moth. I want to say too that I feel like the authority that you have today is moral authority, that 31 cities opposed this when they heard an opposition panel. And I would like you to do that at some point in the future, is hear a panel of scientists and physicians to really talk about this whole program and the necessity for it. The testing that they're talking about is short-term exposure testing, which really has nothing to do with long-term exposure, which is what people will be experiencing. These are overlapping 90-day airborne exposures of the pheromone. There's been no long-term testing and absolutely no inhalation testing, which is the route of exposure. So we really don't know whether these are toxic or not. We have no way to establish that as fact. We've already been told that the spray was non-toxic, and we were able, with a lot of recent action and several lawsuits and threatened lawsuits, to slow that process down, but we don't know what's coming. Secretary of Agriculture Kawamura said on the Angie Kairos show on May 9th that the light brown apple moth has been here for 6 to 7 years. The scientists that are independent, that are consulting with us, are saying probably more like 30 to 50 years. Therefore, if the moth has been here this long and we have absolutely no crop damage, this is not an emergency, and that's what the 2 courts said as well, that the state had not been able to show that this was an emergency. As a nurse, I want to say that children, pound for pound, eat more food than we do, drink more water than we do, breathe more air than we do, and their detoxification systems are also immature. So they are much more vulnerable to what look like tiny amounts of chemicals to us. More and more scientific studies are coming out showing that we're finding in fetal blood, fetal cord blood, pesticides, medication, chemicals, so that people are coming into the world already with a load. And what we have to look at is the toxic mix, the toxic stew that we can be adding to when we might not need to add anything. I do hope that you come back to have a professional panel come and speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Chris Bowen. I'm a vineyard manager in Sonoma Valley. I actually manage 3 vineyards that are in the quarantine zone. And I believe I'm probably the only person here who's got a vineyard that's within one of the treatment areas, because the corner of this vineyard is within 200 meters of one of the LBAM fines. I'm not interested in spraying. I don't want to spray more stuff. I want to nip the pest, if it is a pest, in the bud. I think we need more study about whether LBAM is a pest or going to be a pest in California. But my point, the point I'd like to make is that until we know, when we've had the time to do those kinds of studies, it makes sense to me to try to limit LBAM and try to prevent further spread of it, because you know, and if possible, to do it through means like the pheromone twist ties that have relatively low environmental impact. The twist tie mating disruption is, you know, is a good means to try to stop the spread of the pest. And that's where we need to be at this point in time. We need more information. We have opinions from experts on one side or the other about whether it's a pest, whether it's been here a short period of time, a long period of time. And I'd just like to be able to harvest our grapes this year, get them to market, and hopefully get some answers in the near future. But I think using the pheromone twist ties in the short term is a low-risk thing to do. One other point, and that's that some of the other people that have been here have mentioned about LBAM not being a pest. Maybe it isn't, but historically, introduced pests that came to the United States from outside areas, are the ones that really tend to get out of control, end up costing a lot of money to try to limit, and if we can do it in a way that doesn't cause us to have to spray a lot, let's do it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Tracy Bigelow from Oakland, and I'm working with Stop the Spray East Bay. And I just have two questions. One is, in New Zealand, they monitor with traps. When they find more than 30 in one trap, then they do spot treatment. So I'm just curious, what's the urgency when only 2 moths have been found? And secondly, Ann Wishner from the IPM Task Force of Albany says that in order for twist ties to have any effect on the LBAM, there need to be 1,000 per hectare, which would look like a Christmas tree covered with ornaments. So I'm curious how many ties per tree are planned for the targeted areas.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Nick Price, Sonoma County Wine Grape Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at the hearing. I think I have just a couple of comments. Obviously, there's lots of differing views or concerns about this program. For agriculture, I think there's clear that the quarantine poses a major risk. It poses a risk for our county, and it's a risk that we have the potential to avoid with a fairly localized and environmentally sound excuse me, program with the twist ties. Pheromone mating disruption has been a cornerstone of the organic fruit industry in this county and others. It is part of an IPM program. Organic production does use pesticides, but they're all organically approved pesticides. And if you do not have an effective way of controlling an insect, and you can use mating disruption to keep the populations low, you can produce high quality organic fruit. It is that kind of technology we're bringing, and it is also, if we can keep the pest out, not let it establish here, we can avoid the costs and the environmental impacts of ongoing treatment. So I think that the program is a good alternative, and I think it has worked in other places, and it works here, and we can be free from this insect. It's going to be a very important thing for agriculture in this county and potentially our environment, because as Chris Bowen said, an invasive pest, we can predict that it won't do anything, but if you run the experiment and you're wrong, then you don't want to deal with that. So I think it's prudent, and I hope that the community will support the use of the twist tie program. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next speaker, please. Could I get a show of hands of anyone else that wants to speak to this item? I see no one, so Lex, you'll be our last speaker.
Great, thank you, Supervisor Curtis. Lex McCorby, representing the Sonoma County Farm Bureau. I have found this morning's discussion extremely enlightening. I want to applaud Supervisor Brown and all of you for allowing the public to voice their concerns, because I think they're very realistic concerns. In the agricultural community, we realize that to produce our food and fiber and to protect our environment, we not only need to listen to the concerns of the community, but also understand how we fit in the total context of a global industry as well. And I think that what's my primary concern, I think, when I first heard about the light brown apple moth, was not only for agriculture, but also for the environment. I think it's been touched upon a bit here today. We can indeed say that light brown apple moth is perhaps not a pest, and some people will believe that, but if a light brown apple moth looks like a calling moth, eats like a calling moth, and does the same kind of damage around the world as a calling moth, as well as it's done right here in Sonoma County, for local agriculture to survive, we need to understand how we're going to address those pests, but also to find solutions. And to simply avoid or use avoidance as a solution just doesn't work for society. We need to work together to provide solutions and provide a way to control the pests. I think, too, that we have a moral imperative to protect our food supply and our environment. It's not just food, it's not just grapes, but it's also the habitat for insects and birds and other species on this planet and our community that are important. And we recognize that whether it be sudden oak death syndrome or some other pest that we're having to deal with, we as a society need to protect all species, and we need to do so in a way that's responsive to society as a whole. And I think that that we're fortunate in that, you know, we don't have some of the pest issues that some other countries or places around the world do. And I think we lose sight of the damage that can be done. It was interesting this morning to read an article on the upcoming Olympics, which indicated that in Beijing, they have 33,000 pest control operators using 200 tons of pesticides, insecticides to control locusts. You know, heaven forbid that we would ever have that kind of infestation here. But we need to keep our vision on the horizon and recognize that being responsive to pest control and working collectively as a society and a community is extremely important to protect us against light brown apple moth or any other pests that we encounter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lex. At that point, do we have one? I'm sorry. So one more? All right, you'll be the last speaker.
Hi, thank you. I'm Mary Beth Brannigan from the Ecological Options Network, and we've been interviewing people of various sorts, experts and entomologists on this issue for the last 3 or 4 months. One of the interesting interviews that we've done is with one of the founders of the pheromones. And he was very concerned about this program because pheromones have never been intended to eradicate. They are intended to control and confuse mating, obviously. So I just wanted to clarify that point. The other thing he said that he found very disturbing was that the word eradication was being used here. It is impossible to eradicate. There's been over 80 attempts to eradicate an insect by the agencies here in the United States. Not one has ever worked. So what the previous speaker was talking about is the responsibility of having a balance. This is what all of us who are concerned are speaking to, maintaining our balance in the ecosystems. So far, the light brown apple moth has been kept in balance, has been kept from doing any harm, obviously, or the CDFA lawyers would have presented that proof at these trials, that the lawsuits that were heard earlier. The solution is not to do nothing. The solution is to enhance our natural predators. And that means having a row of habitat for them every 9th row. There's a woman who is a scientist from the University of California who actually went to New Zealand to study how best to deal with the light brown apple moth. And what she discovered was the simple method of planting every 9th row in habitat that would allow for the flourishing of the natural predators, and that worked. And the natural predators are earwigs, the spiders, the wasps that already exist. This is why we don't have a problem with the light brown apple moth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That will conclude the public comment.